Power not delegated is treason. This is an idea that was encapsulated by so many of our founding fathers, especially the old revolutionaries. In this video, we're going to deep dive into this idea by looking at several quotes and articles from our founding fathers. We're going to look at the Constitution and try to discover if the federal government today is exercising authority that you and I, through our states and the Constitution, have not delegated directly to it. I'm looking forward to hearing your thoughts and your comments down below as we all continue to master our craft and develop our tactical virtue. Let's get into this right away with July the 4th, 1776. The Declaration of Independence. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, and that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. And of course, the Declaration goes on and uses very specific words that were known at the time to convey a very powerful and intentional meaning. They used words like usurpations and evils, a long train of abuses, despotism, and the list goes on. Words, again, that have very intentional meanings. Wonder what they would say to us today and of our federal, or as it is commonly operated, as a national government. Let's move on to Thomas Paine. But before we do, notice here that Thomas Jefferson and the 13 United States of America are declaring that governments are instituted among men. They derive their powers by the people who are being governed. Thomas Paine in The Rights of Man in 1792 would say this, that men mean distinct and separate things when they speak of constitutions and of governments. It's evident, or why would they use terms distinctly and be separately used? A constitution is not the act of a government, but of the people constituting a government, right? It's not just a play on words. Government without a constitution is power without a right. Hear this. All power exercised over a nation must have some type of beginning. It is either delegated or it is assumed. There are no other sources. All delegated power is trust, and all assumed power is usurpation. Time does not alter the nature and quality of either. Listen to what Thomas Paine is saying. At the end of the day, a government exercises power from one of two ways. It is either a matter of trust, it's delegated, or it is assumed. And if it is assumed power, then it is an usurpation, and it very well could be a tyranny. In Paine's view, government was an agent of the people, right? Government was an agent. It was the people getting together and saying there are things that need to be done that I can't do all by myself. I can't build all the roads, and I can't coordinate with everybody directly. I need to have somebody work in my stead as an agent of me for my benefit to take care of these common necessities that are needed, whether it's transportation, whether it's trade, whether it's healthcare, whatever it is that the people and the states decide that needs to happen, right? But it all begins with you and with I. Sam Adams, this dude was a legend in his own time. Man, he was so hated by the British government that they would be willing to offer anybody a pardon except for him and old John Hancock. Hear what Sam Adams said in an article that he wrote back in 1776 on the 3rd of February, which happens to be my son's birthday, not the 1776 part. Dependence of one man or state upon another is either absolute or limited by some certain terms of agreement. That agreement, and you can go on and read this. I would challenge and encourage you to read the whole article. But I'll leave this here. You can pause it and read the whole thing. At the end of the day, dependence of one man or a state on another is either absolute or it is limited. You either have a tyrannical form of government who exercises absolute power, that whatever they say has the final word. We're going to come back to this in a little bit when we look at the Constitution. Or it is limited. There is no other way. We're going to look at the Constitution, but before we do, let's consider a quote by the father of the Constitution, James Madison. Madison, of course, was a Federalist. He wrote the Constitution. He was in favor for it. And the Federalists wrote a series of papers arguing why the Constitution should be ratified. Primary audience was just a couple states, right, that they had to win over. Arguing against them were the anti-Federalists, and they had some very deep and serious, grave concerns, one of which was what the federal government was going to have the power to be able to do. And here James Madison says this, that the powers delegated by the proposed Constitution to the federal government are few and defined, and that those which are to remain in the state governments are numerous and indefinite. What the federal government can do is very limited. There are only a few things that the federal government has the right, the delegated right, in order to exercise. They don't have carte blanche authority to do whatever it is that they want to do. Once they step outside of what is clearly defined, you find an usurpation. And so what James Madison here was arguing, he was arguing against the people who said the Constitution gives too much power to the federal government, gives too much power to the President of the United States, gives too much power to the legislature. And James Madison said, hey guys, man, I hear you, but if it is not clearly articulated in the enumerated powers in the Constitution, you don't have to worry about it. We don't have to say that the government can't infringe upon the right to keep and bear arms. Again, James Madison, he didn't want the Bill of Rights. Neither did Hamilton and any of the other Federalists. He said you don't have to worry about that because it's not in the Constitution saying that the federal government can infringe upon the right to keep and bear arms. Right? If it wasn't for those anti-federalists, by the way, we would not have a Bill of Rights. But what does the Constitution say? What are these few and limited powers? Article 1, Section 8. I always get a chuckle to know that the legislative branch's powers are in Section 8 because I think of housing, right? Section 8 housing. It's kind of jacked up, as is the legislature. So Article 1, Section 8 says that the legislative branch can lay and collect taxes, impose and excises, think tariffs, by the way, when you read all that, to pay debts, provide for the common defense and general welfare, borrow money, regulate commerce, establish rules for naturalization, bankruptcies, coin money, establish post offices, issue and protect patents, conduct tribunals, deal with piracy, declaring war, raising and supporting the Army and the Navy, and calling forth the militia. That's it. It does go on to say that to make laws which shall be necessary and proper for carrying into the execution of the foregoing powers and all other powers vested by the Constitution in the government of the United States or in any department or officer thereof, right? But that's it. And you'll notice that most of these powers have to do with the purse, right? It was one of the arguments against the Confederation, right? That they didn't have enough power, the federal government didn't have enough power as it related to currency. And so they put that in here into the Constitution, saying we need a constitutional government to have these powers. Otherwise, we're going to be weak and we're going to be subject to outside influence that will tear us apart. And so that's why there are so many specific enumerated powers as it relates to money. But if you scratch those away, what else do we have? Common defense, general welfare, post offices, support the Army and the Navy financially, declaring war. That's it. How much of what the federal government is into on a daily basis, when you look at all of the departments, fall in line with one of these enumerated powers? Kind of hard to make the dots connect, isn't it? Oh, you need a license to talk on a radio. I don't know which. Well, we can make it somehow connect. Playing loose. Even James Madison, I don't think, would be all too happy. Article 2, Section 2 of 3 of the executive branch, dealing with the commander-in-chief, has the power for reprieves and pardons, to make treaties, appoint ambassadors, as well as all the other public officials, especially for all those departments, which, by the way, we didn't start off with a bunch of departments. It was only a couple. To provide a State of the Union, and then to convene and adjourn Congress. Article 3, Section 2, the judicial powers, very limited. But judicial powers are extended to all cases arising under the Constitution, laws of the United States, treaties, and any controversy that arises between an individual, a citizen, and the state, between a citizen and the federal government, between the state and the federal government, or between any of those and an outside entity or foreign state. That's what the judicial powers have or are encapsulated by. Right? That's literally their job. It's not their job to fall in line. It's their job to look at the Constitution and any controversy and deal a judgment or render a judgment. Now, I highlighted the necessary and proper clause because this is one of the things that just chews at me at the back of my neck. I just, gosh, dang it irritates me so much, as well as common very vague statements like common defense and general welfare. These three statements are so vague, and people use them to create ways of exercising power that is not directly delegated, which is what? It's an usurpation. But notice that they can only create laws for the execution of the foregoing powers and any other power that's in the Constitution. It has to be direct and well defined, right? There are few powers, not all the powers. All the powers are the states, right? Isn't that what James Madison said? So what else does the Constitution say in Article 4? Full faith and credit given to each state. Privileges citizenship deals with if you're charged in one state and you're in another, who has jurisdiction. Admission of new states, guaranteeing a Republican form of government. Article 5, proposing amendments. Article 6, honoring debts that were incurred before the Constitution. All laws and treaties being made supreme law, right? A federal law is supreme law. This was another sticking point for those old revolutionaries. And that officials are bound by oath, but there cannot be a religious test. So only the foregoing powers, and then all of these does the judicial branch have the authority, the delegated authority, to make legislation, to make a law. Only in these can a government department make a code. Right? Codes are not law, but they can't make a code if it's not in one of these enumerated powers. Anything else that's outside of that is an usurpation, or it is a form of tyranny. Here's what John Locke had to say in the two treatises of civil government all the way back in 1689. As usurpation is the exercise of power which another has the right to, tyranny is the exercise of power which nobody has a right to, right? Comparing and contrasting what usurpation is and tyranny. Usurpation is me doing something that you have the authority or the power to. Tyranny is doing something that nobody has the authority or the power to do. And this is making use of the power anyone has in his hands, not for the good of those who are under it, but for his own private and separate advantage. When the governor, he's talking about any person who is in a government, a public official, however entitled, makes not the law, but his will the rule, and his commands and actions are not directed to the preservation of the properties of the people, but the satisfaction of his own ambition, revenge, covetousness, or any other irregular passion. In other words, we used to have this phrase in the military: not use my rank, grade, or position to attain pleasure, profit, or personal safety. In other words, I'm not going to use my position to get things that I want to get done, regardless of what the people want. And we're not just talking about a simple majority. We're not talking about a mob rule democracy. We're talking about a republican form of government. And that's, I think, one of the things our founding fathers would have an issue with, the amount and quantity and quality, as well as nature, of what so many executive orders have to deal with. Absolutely absurd. So what we have ultimately are a bunch of just a snippet, a glimpse into many of our founding fathers' views of the limited role of government, and that anytime a government exceeds those delegated powers, you have ultimately one of two things: an usurpation or treason. A lot of times we look at treason as if though it's the people rising above and fighting the powers that be. One, that's a little bit of a backwards view of power. Again, as we looked at, governments are delegated power, right? Governments derive their power from the people, right? The several states decided what power the federal government was going to have. And so anytime that federal government exceeds that, then you have potentially a form of treason. Taking power that nobody has the right to. You need an example. Let's talk about an example. Let's look at the Second Amendment. That the right to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed, right? It's necessary for a free state. So what anything that goes against that would be usurpation or tyranny, right? If we're saying that nobody has the right to derive that to erode that, to put any sort of friction upon this right, that nobody can infringe upon it. Anytime somebody does, is that an usurpation or is it tyrannical? According to John Locke, it is tyrannical, because nobody has the right to do it. So, if I wanted to drink the Kool-Aid and to get on the bus, this is one of the things I would need to see. I would need to see the federal government, A, abiding by themselves, and B, telling the several states, particularly states like New York, New Mexico, Washington, California, Oregon, and so many others, that have state laws that infringe upon that Second Amendment, to say you are exceeding your role. The agency that you have been entrusted with, you have overstepped. You are acting in usurpation. If I don't see that, then I can't, in good faith, drink the Kool-Aid. Just like, another example, we saw that many of those laws for the legislative branch deal with the purse. So I'm left wondering, why is it that we are increasing the debt limit with the last CR? Why are not, I'm all for the Doge looking into and finding some sort of transparency. But if we're not implementing those cuts in the CR, which we did not do, then we're just wagging the dog. That's what that tail is doing. It's just wagging the dog. And you and I are the dog. And the swamp, the current swamp, is the tail. So maybe I'm wrong, maybe. But let's look, we only have a few months left until a federal budget should be voted on. So there's a few gates prior to us getting to that in a few months. But at the end of the day, if we don't see drastic cuts in our budget, if we don't stop deficit spending, if we don't continue to add to our national debt, if we don't actually draw down the size of government, you can talk about getting rid of departments. You can talk about, oh, you're not even firing people. You're putting people on paid leave. If we're not simply telling people to sit at home and collect a paycheck, a big fat one, if that's all we're doing, I'm more than disappointed. Indignation is burning. Team, I'm looking forward to hearing your thoughts and your comments down below about the nature and the role of government and the powers that it has, and if it is acting outside those delegated powers and is truly operating in usurpation or in treason. And then finally, of course, what the hell do we do about it? Team, I appreciate you guys. Until then, you stay out there, you keep grinding, and you stay stoked. Team, if you want to master your craft and develop your tactical virtue, make sure you subscribe to the channel and click that notification bell so that you can stay up to date with future content. Consider becoming a channel member. It's going to give you exclusive access to content not available to anybody else. I appreciate you guys. Until then, you stay out there, you keep grinding, and you stay stoked.
I know you're out there! Come to my voice!